My name is Lisa. I am sitting at my coffee lounge imagining how cruel some people can be to others, for the fact that I do not share a bloodline with you do not give you the right to make or rather force me take a fall for a crime I didn't commit. This is a story of how my boss made me took a fall for his nephew who stole the company's $2 million, and I want to share it with you. For 10 long years I dedicated my life. I truly believed that loyalty was the most valuable currency you could earn in the workplace. I thought that doing good work and being completely trustworthy meant everything, especially at a successful place like Sterling Dynamics. I paused for a long, quiet moment, letting that idealistic idea hang heavy in the air. I viewed Charles, my boss, not just as the CEO, but as my mentor, a figure I genuinely considered a kind of protective father figure. That was before he looked me straight in the eye and asked me to completely destroy my own life and my entire future career just to save his incompetent, spoiled nephew, David, from facing prison time for a massive crime. I leaned in slightly toward the camera, my expression hardening. Has anyone here ever been truly, deeply, and wickedly betrayed by someone you trusted with your entire career and your future? That terrible, crushing feeling in your chest, like the solid floor has completely vanished beneath your feet? This is the story of how I didn't just find the floor again and stand up. I learned exactly how to make the entire Sterling Dynamics building collapse on him, one piece at a time, until nothing was left. It all started innocently enough, just a routine audit, when I was working late one night, deep into the night, trying to reconcile some strange, recurring numbers in the company's quarterly report that simply did not add up. I was known at Sterling Dynamics for my total dedication to accuracy, often staying long after everyone else had gone home, checking every single financial detail until it was perfect and made sense. I noticed a few unusual, tiny transfers at first, nothing major, but then they grew larger and more confident, moving with a disturbing regularity. I spent an entire, anxious week quietly and secretly piecing together the complex, dark digital trail. I saw how David, Charles's nephew and the vice president of operations, had been carefully and secretly funneling company money. It was not a small mistake or a minor accounting error. It was a planned, sophisticated, and completely deliberate robbery. The final number, the one that made my blood run cold and my stomach churn, was exactly $2 million. I had ironclad evidence, right there on my screen, showing every single transfer, every fake invoice, and every step of David's greedy, criminal plot, documented perfectly and completely. I felt sick and completely disgusted by the betrayal of the company's trust. The next morning, the air felt heavy and cold, thick with the unsaid truth. My hands were shaking slightly with nerves as I carried the thick stack of files, but my resolve was completely steady. I walked into Charles's huge, quiet corner office, the place I had always seen as a safe haven and a place of honest leadership and guidance. The room was bathed in morning sunlight, a stark contrast to the darkness of the documents I held. I laid the entire stack of ironclad evidence, neatly organized and tabbed, right on his mahogany desk, expecting immediate outrage, complete shock, and swift justice for the crime David had committed. I waited for him to immediately pick up the phone and call the company board or the police. I looked directly at him, waiting for his righteous anger to erupt. Instead, Charles simply leaned back slowly in his expensive leather chair, taking a slow, steady breath, the sound loud in the quiet room. He looked down at the documents, scanning the final page that showed the total $2 million theft. Then he looked up at me. He was completely, unnervingly calm, almost serene. There was no outrage in his eyes, only a strange, cold calculation, as if he were simply reviewing the price of a stock. His chilling stillness in the face of such a massive crime was the first true, loud alarm bell, a cold knot forming deep in my stomach, telling me that something was profoundly and wickedly wrong with the entire situation. Charles did not deny the evidence I had collected or question the massive amount that was stolen. Instead, he slowly and deliberately pushed the incriminating documents aside with the tip of his finger, as if they were nothing more than simple trash or a minor inconvenience. He then delivered his unbelievable and cruel, take the fall proposition. He spoke in a low, even completely professional tone, framing it as a cold, completely strategic business decision. not a moral or ethical one. Lisa, he said, his eyes hard and completely uncaring, refusing to meet my shocked gaze. You are clearly good at your job, but you are also, frankly, disposable. You are just a name on the payroll, an employee we can easily replace. David, however, is family. He is my nephew, my sister's son, the one who will eventually inherit this company. You need to take the fall for this $2 million embezzlement. We will frame it as a small gross negligence on your part, maybe a minor oversight in your reports. I will give you a large, very generous sum of money to walk away, disappear quietly, and never speak of this again. He looked at me, completely serious, leaning slightly forward. You are just an employee. He is the future of this company, and family comes first. This is simply business, Lisa, nothing personal or emotional. The sheer horror of the word disposable hit me like a train, and the temptation of the massive money was immediately silenced by my deep moral revulsion. I sat in stunned, horrified silence for a few long, agonizing seconds, completely unable to believe the wicked words that were coming out of the mouth of the man who had supposedly guided and mentored my entire career for a decade. Then, my voice shaking violently with pure shock and sudden, intense fury, I refused his proposition completely and immediately. I told him in a clear voice that I would not destroy my spotless, decade-long professional reputation and face jail time for his lazy, criminal nephew's greedy mistake. That was the precise moment when Charles completely dropped his calm, cold, business mask, and his true ugly, vengeful colors immediately showed through. His face turned a deep, angry red, and the veins in his neck popped out visibly. You will do exactly what I say right now, Lisa, he roared suddenly, slamming his fist with a loud crash on the desk, making the entire office jump. He leaned in close across the desk, his voice now a low, dangerous, venomous growl. If you do not comply with my wishes right now, I will personally see to it that you are completely blacklisted. I will ruin your entire name and your life across this city and the entire industry. You will never, ever get another respectable job in this industry, anywhere in the world. Think about your future, Lisa. You have absolutely no power here. I can ruin you forever without even trying to exert myself. I felt the walls of the small, luxurious office suddenly closing in on me, threatening to suffocate me with his immense power. I left Charles's office in a blur of pain, disbelief, and silent, hot tears. I drove home slowly, mechanically following the rules of the road, and the very moment I stepped into my quiet, empty apartment, the heavy emotional weight of the betrayal hit me like a physical punch to the gut, making me immediately gasp for breath. I collapsed onto my small, worn sofa, completely shattered and unable to move. The emotional pain of the betrayal was 1,000 times worse than any physical injury could ever be. I kept thinking about all the late nights I worked, the times I covered for Charles, and the complete, total loyalty I had given him completely and without question. I felt foolish, weak, naive, and utterly betrayed by a man I had loved and trusted like a father figure. I felt intensely trapped and completely powerless against his massive influence. He held all the cards in his hand. The power, the money, the connections, and the ability to ruin my name with a single, quick phone call to his powerful friends. I knew that fighting him legally would completely drain me financially and mentally, and I would likely lose everything I had worked for over the past decade. The silence of the apartment felt heavy with my ruined future. I spent a long, agonizing, sleepless night staring at my pale, tear-streaked reflection in the dark, cold window. My initial despair, the feeling of being trapped and utterly powerless, slowly began to cool and harden into something cold, steady, sharp, and entirely new. It was a new, icy resolve that burned deep in my chest, replacing the tears and the fear. I looked at the broken person staring back at me and realized the only way out of this impossible situation was to play Charles's terrible, cynical game, but to play it better, harder, and much more ruthlessly than he ever could have imagined. I knew I couldn't fight him head-on right now. He was simply too strong and too powerful. I decided then and there. I would calmly take the fall, I would accept his dirty money, but this would be my first move in a much longer, more dangerous game of revenge. I would become the person he wanted me to be, the disposable scapegoat, but I would do it with a secret, unbreakable plan, A quiet promise to myself that one day, he would pay the full, real price for his cruelty and wicked betrayal. The woman in the glass had changed. She was ready for war. The public humiliation was swift, brutal, and completely agonizing. Charles called an immediate all-hands meeting in the large, crowded auditorium the very next morning. The air was thick with tension and confusion. He stood on the stage, looking sad, deeply disappointed, and completely regretful, playing the part of the disappointed, caring mentor perfectly for the cameras. He announced my immediate firing for gross negligence and failure of professional oversight, in front of everyone. The room was silent, but I felt hundreds of eyes judging me, whispering horrible things about my supposed incompetence and my ruined character. I stood there, absorbing the unfairness with a blank face. My colleagues, people I considered good friends, immediately turned on me, not daring to question Charles's word or risk their own secure jobs. The worst, most painful part was seeing David, the actual thief and criminal, standing near the back, wearing a smug, horrible smirk on his face, celebrating his perfect escape from justice and my public ruin. I walked out of that building for the last time, holding my head high despite the shame, but feeling the heavy weight of every judging stare and every cruel, silent accusation like a physical blow to my wounded spirit. A large sum of money, exactly what he had promised me as the reward, hit my empty bank account later that afternoon. It was more money than I had ever seen in one place, enough to live comfortably for a few years without working a single day. But I looked at the huge number on the screen with cold, deep revulsion, not a single bit of gratitude or happiness. I recognized the money for what it truly was. Not a genuine reward for my forced silence, but a cheap, ugly tool Charles used for control, and for buying my permanent disappearance. It was blood money, stained with the betrayal of my trust and the ruin of my spotless reputation. I immediately and decisively transferred the entire amount into a separate, secret offshore account, setting it aside completely. I made a solemn promise to myself that I would not touch a single penny of it for my own living expenses. This money was now part of my strategic plan, a key piece of leverage, a symbol of the cynical, wicked transaction that had taken place. I knew that Charles would assume I was spending it quickly, living in luxury and silence, but I was instead quietly preparing my war chest for the fight ahead. The moment I was safely installed in my quiet new apartment, far away from my old office, I accessed my secret insurance file. A file I had quietly created over my 10 years at Sterling Dynamics out of simple professional caution. I had always been cautious, recording sensitive, questionable meetings and saving digital copies of ambiguous internal documents, never once thinking I would need to use them as a devastating weapon against the powerful man who employed me. But now, this file was my entire arsenal, my complete power. It contained hours of recordings of Charles making questionable statements, emails that clearly contradicted official company policy on major matters, and most importantly, copies of the original, detailed audit reports proving David's $2 million embezzlement beyond any doubt. I meticulously checked every file, every timestamp, and every piece of digital evidence, making absolutely sure it was all ironclad and completely untraceable back to me, the disgraced former employee. This secret arsenal, locked away in an encrypted drive, was my only real power against the powerful corporation and the self-serving family that controlled it completely. My first strategic move was to become a complete ghost, erasing my old professional self completely from the public eye. My second move was to create my anonymous, powerful online persona. I chose the name Verity, a beautiful, strong name which meant truth. As Verity, I created a complex, untraceable digital identity, using layers of encryption and private networks. My goal was not to suddenly burst out and tell the world the full truth, which would be too reckless and easily dismissed by the powerful. Instead, I began subtly and quietly engaging with Apex Collective, which was Sterling Dynamics' biggest and most aggressive market rival in the entire industry. I used encrypted channels to study their top leadership, their current weaknesses, and their market movements. I slowly began to position Verity as an expert, a knowledgeable, wise voice on the entire industry, hinting at the deep, hidden rot and vulnerability within Sterling Dynamics without ever naming the company directly in any post. As Verity, I knew I needed to move from subtle, quiet hints to direct, credible, and immediate action to gain trust. I composed a single, highly cryptic, but factually accurate tip that would be easy for them to verify. The critical tip concerned a small, known, yet deeply significant weakness in Sterling Dynamics' upcoming quarterly financial forecast, something only an insider would know. I sent this crucial small piece of information, using the most secure encryption I could find, directly to the main, generic email address of Apex Collective CEO, a very successful man named Marcus Thorne. I made absolutely sure the tip was just credible enough to be quickly verified by his smart team, but not so large that it would give away my identity or my full knowledge of the company's inner workings. It was the perfect strategic piece of bait, designed to prove my value without revealing my full power or my full hand. I was quietly hinting to Marcus Thorne that I knew the deep, important, costly secrets of his biggest rival, and I was quietly offering him a secret peek behind the curtain of their weakness and decline. The bait worked exactly as planned and even better than I had hoped. We then cut immediately to Charles in his huge, quiet office a few weeks later. He was starting to feel the first few, major tremors of deep instability and chaos in the company he had built. A key, massive client, Omnicorp, had suddenly become very nervous and was asking difficult, unexpected, and specific questions about the coming year's budget and projected returns. These questions were directly related to the exact weakness I had secretly leaked to Apex. Charles, who was always used to being in complete, unchallenged control, was now blindsided, confused, and deeply agitated. He furiously blamed the growing problems on a bad, slow market cycle, and shouted loudly at his remaining, overworked staff to immediately fix the problems, unaware that the real, dangerous instability was coming from me, the person he thought he had completely silenced and removed forever. He was now desperately struggling to cover David's initial $2 million hole, completely unaware that his former disposable employee was now actively digging a much bigger, deeper hole right beneath his expensive feet. Marcus Thorne's team at Apex Collective, professional, smart, and ruthlessly ambitious, quickly and quietly verified my small, cryptic leak. The information was not only accurate but also incredibly actionable, and they knew it was invaluable. The Apex team was instantly hungry for more, and wanted to know exactly who Verity was, and where they got their information. I knew this was my chance to set the hook deeply and irrevocably. I received an encrypted, formal message from Apex, requesting a secure, anonymous call to discuss the potential consulting arrangement with Verity. I smiled to myself, feeling the first rush of complete satisfaction and deep power. Charles thought he had completely ruined my career, but I was now being secretly courted by his biggest rival. I spent hours preparing for the call, not just practicing the technical financial details, but preparing my persona. I knew my mere knowledge was valuable, but my strategic mind and my complete, full plan were priceless to them. I agreed to the anonymous call, ensuring the connection was completely untraceable. Using a complex voice modulator to completely hide my true identity and my voice, I spoke directly with Marcus Thorne himself. I did not speak like a victim or a disgruntled, angry former employee seeking pity. I spoke like a cold, highly strategic financial analyst who saw the entire board game. During the long, tense conversation, I did not just passively answer his questions about the rot within Sterling Dynamics. I expertly demonstrated my deep, intimate knowledge of his rivals' finances, their personnel weaknesses, and their future strategic missteps that would ruin them. I calmly outlined 3 immediate, key moves Apex could make right now to gain a massive, unrecoverable market advantage. Marcus Thorne listened, fascinated and silent, for over an hour. I could tell by his tone, which was respectful and serious, that I had moved far beyond just being a helpful source of information. I was now a strategic mind he needed immediately on his team, regardless of my false, ruined public reputation. The time had come to step out of the complete shadows and show my true identity. I agreed to meet Marcus Thorne in person, at a completely neutral, secure location far from the city and far from Charles's eyes. I dropped the Verity persona completely. I looked him straight in the eye and revealed my true, legal identity. Lisa, the disgraced, publicly fired employee of Sterling Dynamics. I did not ask him for a job or a salary. Instead, I presented him with my complete, final, devastating plan. A powerful partnership to completely acquire Sterling Dynamics, using the detailed insider intelligence I possessed as leverage. I explained calmly that I didn't want a simple salary. I wanted the power and the means to destroy Charles and rebuild the company from the ground up. Impressed by my sheer nerve, my deep strategic insight, and my depth of specific knowledge, Marcus Thorne immediately offered me the executive position of Vice President of Special Acquisitions. It was a new crown of immense power, far above anything Charles had ever given me. I shook his hand, and the partnership was sealed. My first major, public action for Apex was the perfect, planned strike, designed to look like a simple market victory. Using the detailed insider intelligence I had gathered, I helped Apex formulate an aggressive, compelling proposal for Omnicorp, the key client Charles was so desperately trying to keep and calm down. Apex offered a better price, a better long-term plan, and most importantly, a guarantee of honest, transparent management. Things I knew Charles's quickly failing company could no longer possibly provide, being so riddled with fraud. The massive, lucrative Omnicorp contract was successfully poached by Apex within a single week. The loss was a huge, visible public blow to Sterling Dynamics' market standing. Charles was completely blindsided, unable to understand how his company had lost a client that was considered a guaranteed fixture for the next 20 years. He never once suspected that the negligent employee he had ruthlessly fired was now the powerful, strategic mind actively dismantling his company from the outside, piece by piece. The next critical stage of my plan was to completely cripple Sterling Dynamics from the inside out, making it an easy, cheap target for Apex. I began to orchestrate a massive, systematic talent drain that Charles could not stop. I quietly and secretly contacted the best and brightest former colleagues, the true, honest stars of the company who had helped me in the past with my own projects. I avoided contacting the gossipers or the weak employees. I offered them new, better, more secure positions at Apex, promising them better pay, better titles, and most importantly, a truly ethical work environment where they would be valued for their honesty. The best people, unhappy under Charles's new, stressed, and angry leadership, happily left in droves, accepting my offer. This talent drain quickly crippled Sterling Dynamics' key operations. Key projects stalled completely, communication broke down rapidly, and their ability to function day-to-day began to fall apart completely. The company's visible decline was now rapid, undeniable, and impossible to hide from the entire market. Charles, driven by intense desperation and panic, made the final, critical mistake I was waiting for, digging his own grave. To desperately cover the growing financial hole left by the loss of Omnicorp and David's initial theft, Charles involved a shady, secretive, and extremely dangerous investor named Mr. Forlag. Mr. Forlag offered fast money and immediate cash flow, but demanded crippling interest rates and secret control of certain company assets and major decisions. I carefully noted every detail of this mistake. I knew that Charles, blinded by his fear and his desperate need to hide his nephew's crime, had just entangled Sterling Dynamics in a completely unethical, dangerous, and likely illegal deal. This entanglement, which was a clear violation of SEC rules, was the final poison pill I needed to guarantee his complete, total ruin and the successful takeover by Apex without question. My paranoia about Charles tracking me was soon validated. A private investigator, secretly hired by a frantic Charles to follow me and see what I was doing, actually got close to me. He followed me to a small, quiet coffee shop one afternoon near my new home. I recognized him instantly from my old security review days at Sterling Dynamics. I expertly played the part of a broken, recently unemployed, and defeated woman, looking sad and defeated, spending her days reading cheap paperbacks and drinking weak, inexpensive coffee. I deliberately spoke loudly to an old friend on the phone, one I called right there, complaining about how hard it was to find a new job because of the scandal at Sterling Dynamics and how I had to watch my spending. I threw him completely off the scent with my performance. He watched me for an entire hour, noted my poverty, and reported back to Charles that I was no threat, just a ruined victim living on her settlement money, completely absorbed in her own minor problems and completely powerless. He left me alone, completely convinced I was harmless and broken forever. The time for quiet planning, subtle strikes, and acting defeated was finally over. I had all the pieces ready and waiting. This was the masterstroke, the grand finale of my carefully planned revenge. I took the entire full, final, damning audit report, the one proving David's $2 million theft, and crucially the full crystal-clear audio recording of Charles's direct, take-the-fall proposal. I did not send them to the press or a blogger. I sent them directly and simultaneously, via registered untraceable mail, to two key powerful groups, the SEC Securities and Exchange Commission and the Sterling Dynamics Board of Directors. The evidence was irrefutable, undeniable, and completely impossible to ignore or dismiss. I had played Charles's dangerous, cynical game to the end, but I had used honesty and documented proof as my ultimate, devastating weapons. I felt a chill of finality as I pressed the send button on the encrypted files. All hell immediately broke loose, violently and publicly. The reaction was exactly what I had planned and hoped for. The board of directors, terrified of massive lawsuits, shareholder anger, and public scandal, called an emergency, secret meeting within hours of receiving my package. The SEC, faced with such clear evidence of financial crime, theft and internal cover-up by the CEO, immediately launched a full-scale, devastating investigation into Sterling Dynamics' entire finances and management practices. Charles's world was collapsing violently around him completely. The board, acting quickly to save their own personal reputations and the company's remaining value, immediately suspended Charles from his position as CEO, pending the outcome of the investigation. The news of the suspension and the severe SEC probe spread like wildfire and panic through the entire industry overnight. A frantic, completely broken Charles showed up unannounced and uninvited at my secure apartment door a few days later, just as I expected he would. He looked terrible, haggard and pale, like he hadn't slept in a week or more. His usual immense confidence was completely gone, replaced by pure, desperate fear. He was no longer the powerful CEO. He was a desperate, ruined beggar, smelling faintly of alcohol and fear. He pleaded loudly with me to immediately help him. He admitted his massive mistake, tears streaming down his face as he confessed to his immense cruelty. "Lisa, please, I was terribly wrong. I beg you, please save the company. It's our legacy," he pleaded loudly, completely oblivious to the cruel irony that he had just called me disposable months earlier. He asked me to testify that the recording was fake or taken completely out of context. He was a pathetic, desperate mess, and I found deep, cold satisfaction in his utter ruin and complete weakness. I looked at Charles, the desperate beggar, with a cold, calm, beautiful smile playing on my lips. I did not invite him inside my safe, elegant home. I let him stand right there, broken and miserable, on my doorstep, exposed to the world. I listened silently to his entire speech, absorbing the satisfaction of his complete fear and desperation. When he finally finished, his voice cracking with emotion, I offered him a tiny, almost invisible sliver of false hope, just enough to keep him struggling for a little longer, and to give me time for the next step. "Charles," I said, my voice sweet, even, and completely untrustworthy, "I understand how difficult this is for you. You were my mentor for 10 years, after all. Let me see what I can possibly do, how I can help clean up this complicated, terrible mess you've made." I closed the door immediately and gently, but firmly, leaving him standing right there in stunned, confused silence, completely unsure if I was sincerely helping him or just cruelly mocking his despair. The final, public showdown took place in the grand, polished Sterling Dynamics boardroom, the very room where Charles had ruled like a king and made his wicked proposition to me. The emergency meeting of the board of directors was in full swing, discussing Charles's final fate and the company's total future. The heavy oak door opened slowly, and I walked in, not as a desperate supplicant seeking employment or pity, but as the powerful vice president of special acquisitions for Apex Collective. Marcus Thorne, CEO of Apex, walked right beside me, my partner and ally, confirming my powerful status. The board members who had dismissed me months ago gasped in stunned, silent horror and disbelief, recognizing me instantly. Charles, still suspended but present in the room, stared at me from the back of the room, his eyes wide with complete, absolute terror as the full truth finally hit him like a physical blow. I stood at the head of the long boardroom table, taking the most dominant position in the room. The first thing I did, after calmly introducing myself to the stunned board, was play the recording, the full damning audio of Charles's take the fall proposition, for the entire room to hear clearly and undeniably. The voice of their former CEO, cold, cruel, and completely unethical, filled the quiet room, confirming his lack of ethics and his crime. I then calmly laid out my evidence. The original, detailed audit, the notes on the shady Mr. Forlag investor deal, and the complete, documented proof of the massive $2 million cover-up. The board, faced with the undeniable, public truth and the threat of severe legal action, acted immediately and decisively. Charles was officially fired on the spot for gross misconduct and massive ethical failure. The complete, total takeover of Sterling Dynamics by Apex Collective, the rival company, was all but officially assured, purchased cheaply with the exact intelligence Charles tried to bury and deny. In the quiet aftermath of the successful takeover, I sat down slowly in the huge, comfortable CEO chair of the newly acquired division, which was now completely cleansed of Charles's toxic influence and David's incompetence. It felt strange, foreign, and immensely powerful, a reward for my patience. I reflected on my entire, difficult journey, not with a burst of angry glee or cruel victory, but with a deep, quiet sense of peace and profound professional satisfaction. I had not sought revenge for the sake of causing pain. I had sought justice and complete closure for the crime committed against my reputation and my loyalty. I had faced the darkest betrayal and used the very tools of my ruin to build something stronger, more honest and better than before. The company was now ethical, and I was finally free and in complete control of my own destiny and my own future. A few weeks later, after the dust had settled completely, I received a pathetic, handwritten letter in a cheap, crumpled envelope. It was from Charles. He was now officially facing serious criminal charges from the SEC, and was completely destitute and ruined, having lost everything: his job, his wealth, his reputation, and his freedom. The letter was a desperate, final, ugly plea. He begged loudly for a small loan, just enough to pay his mounting legal bills, or perhaps even a kind character witness to speak to his better side in court. The letter was weak, full of self-pity, and completely lacking any genuine remorse for what he had done to me, and it made me feel nothing but cold emptiness and quiet resolution. He was truly ruined, exactly as he had threatened to ruin me a year earlier, and I knew his fate was his own doing. I looked at the pathetic letter, turning it over in my hands once, and then I looked at my bank account, specifically the separate, secret fund where I had quietly kept the original reward money he had given me. It was his blood money, the wicked payment for my betrayal. I knew I couldn't keep it. It felt dirty, stained, and wrong. I did not reply to his desperate letter. Instead, I immediately and completely donated the entire, large sum of reward money to a reputable, honest national charity dedicated to helping whistleblowers who face blacklisting and financial ruin, just as I had faced. This act of giving was my final closure, a true cleansing of his blood money from my life and my accounts. It was a final, powerful declaration that my victory was not about personal greed or profit, but about setting things right and helping others find the courage to fight back against corruption. The final scene was me, Lisa, confident, elegant, and powerful, giving a keynote speech at a major industry conference. I was no longer the disgraced former employee. I was a true industry leader, respected and successful. I looked out at the large, silent audience, filled with many former colleagues and rivals, and I smiled genuinely. My final words to the audience were clear, strong, and deeply felt. So the next time someone tells you to take the fall, I said, my voice ringing with authority and complete conviction, look them straight in the eye, give them a cold, calm smile, and start immediately building a strong ladder from the rubble they tried to bury you in and suffocate you with. I paused, letting the power of the moment sink in completely and quietly. Trust me completely, I finished, a confident, serene smile on my face as the applause began. The view from the absolute top is so much better than the view from the bottom they planned for you.